I understand a withdrawer has a positive view of himself and a negative view of others. However, many withdrawers seem to have this feeling of not being good enough. How do I
make sense of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a good question because it's a subtlety. So the hard part about withdrawers is in a relationship, either with a family member or a peer, they often get the message that in the eyes of their partner, they are not enough. And so that positive view of self, like on my own, I'm good with me. I'm content with me. But in the eyes of my loved one, I get a message that I'm inadequate or not measuring up or failing or not succeeding. And so that can start eroding or corroding or undermining the withdrawer's positive view of self. For this kind of client, I want to know, when was the last time he felt this positive view of himself? It's almost easier to talk about when a pursuer gets burnt out because the behaviors change so obviously when a pursuer gets burnt out and stops pursuing. But when a withdrawer gets burnt out, it's just often a subtle increase of withdrawal, which can be silent and be hard to measure, hard to see. But also that view of self of I'm okay with me starts getting shakier and shakier and shakier. View of self isn't a static, right? Which is why we're working to revise view of self and other in stage 2. It's not a permanent, non-changing character trait. It's on a continuum. Our individual identities are formed by the reflections we get from our loved ones. So if you imagine years of not getting a positive reflection from your loved one, withdrawers will often start questioning their positive view of self. The other possibility is that maybe they're more fearful avoidant, which is a negative view of self and a negative view of other.
So I guess I'm hearing two possibilities. One possibility is that withdrawers feel like they're not good enough in relationship with their partner. That's the reflection they're receiving back. And so that's impactful, and that's what they'll talk about. Never good enough in her eyes, in his eyes.
And that starts eroding that positive view of self that I used to be pretty content with me. Or when I go to work, a withdrawer will say, when I go to work, I'm good.
Yeah. And then the second possibility is trauma. If there's been developmental trauma or trauma in any way, then it's possible the withdrawer could have a negative view of self and a negative view of other.
Not all people with a fearful, avoidant, or chaotic attachment style have had trauma, but a large majority of them have. So that's why we tend to think of fearful, avoidant being most closely associated with those who've endured more than most. There's a small chunk of people that would say, no, I haven't really endured trauma, but yeah, I have a negative view of self and a negative view of other. I was working with a woman yesterday who I worked with them 10 years ago. And back then she still was very protective of her caregivers and how she was raised. And then fast forward 10 years, and it's just amazing. The same view of self is there. And I said to her, but I hope you're seeing it can't be all you. You're a good person. You have a good heart. You're really thoughtful. You're smart. You can't have this chronic, high volume, damaging anger daily and think that it's somehow I must be a terrible person. Like, your anger comes for real reasons. So I'm 10 years ago, 7 years ago, last night was still trying to help her see that people don't become chronically angry for no reason. And so she's a good example. She's not a withdrawer, but she's a good example of how she hasn't thought at all of herself as someone who's endured more than most. But she has a very persistent, chronic defensiveness. And she literally said to me, everything's a threat until proven otherwise. Even my husband, I run scared, I'm unreachable, and I'm constantly afraid. And I was like, wow. There it is. So nothing specific happened to her, but her view of herself and her defensiveness and her reactivity is so heightened. So again, it's not to fit people in categories, but again, those continuums of anxiety and avoidance. And if my withdrawing client can report never really having a positive view of self, that would be interesting in my data collection head and heart.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to be making meaning about that person, but if we get stuck in the process, like I think this lovely young woman is stuck, I think I would need to start reflecting, this is something bigger, echoes of trauma, we need to help you contain, and we need to wedge. That's when I'm having the conversation with her about wedging myself between her and these echoes.
So a withdrawer might have a negative view of self, and that could be because echoes of trauma are coming alive. But when you have an echo, you don't necessarily say, Oh, I remember when I was 5 years old, this occurred and I'm experiencing that echo. It feels like it's coming from within. It feels like
It must be me.
It must be me.
Even with the fearful avoidant attachment style, we can say 85% withdrawer or 60% pursuer, and the percentages aren't exact measurements. But that expresses the continuum of anxiety and avoidance in that intersection of how we make sense of attachment styles, coping strategies, either by turning up the anxiety or by turning up the avoidance, or both in the case of fearful avoidant.
If you just think about it in this very simple way, if I'm withdrawing, then I have a negative view of you because I'm getting away from you, and I have a
that's true.
of me because I'm staying with myself.
That's a lovely way of distilling. Yeah.
It's the opposite, right? Like you've got the gold pot and I've got to get to you and I have a positive view of you and I am messy and I got to get away from me.
Yeah. I'm missing the gold pot that you seem to have. So
yeah. Knock, knock. Come back to me. Right.
I got my lasso out.
Right. So I think your message is don't get too rigid about this. Think of it as a continuum and be open to the person in front of you.
And then, as we know, that view of self is modulated based on those reflections we're getting from our loved ones. So as a young person launches from their family of origin, how did their view of self change when they either didn't get the validation they were used to, or they got away from the negative view of self, the negative reflections they had grown up with? And so then with this partner, and that relationship ended, and then with this partner. And so that's how dynamic it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
For more hot tips on emotionally focused therapy, go to theeftcafe.com and sign up for our newsletter where you will receive short little clips like the one you just watched.